I thought I knew my wife after 15 years of marriage. I couldn't have been more wrong. When she and her mother took a girls' trip, I never imagined what I'd find out when they came back. This is the story of the most twisted family betrayal you've ever heard. My name is Dennis Holbrook. I'm 40 years old, and I've been running my own butcher shop in Millfield, Ohio for the past 12 years. I built it from the ground up with my own two hands, and at the start, the idea of doing it alone scared me to death. Now it's the most popular meat market in 3 counties. People drive 40 miles just to buy my dry-aged steaks and homemade sausages. I take pride in honest work, fair prices, and treating every customer like family. I married Tanya Fuller when I was 25 and she was 20. Back then she was the prettiest girl in town, honey blonde hair, a smile that could stop traffic. Her dad, Vernon, owned the local hardware store, and her mom, Marlene, worked as a secretary at the church. Good people, or so I thought. Solid, God-fearing folks who had raised their daughter right. At least, that's what I believed for 15 years. The first hint that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in the back room of the shop, breaking down a side of beef, when Tanya walked in with that look on her face. The one that says your wife's already decided something. You're just there so she can pretend to ask first. "Dennis, honey," Tanya said, leaning against the doorframe. "Mom and I were thinking about taking a little trip together." I kept working, my knife moving through the meat with practiced precision. "Where to?" "Oh, just down to Florida. You know how Mom's been stressed lately with Dad's blood pressure acting up and all? We figured some beach time would do us both good." I looked up at her then. Tanya was spinning her wedding ring around her finger, the nervous habit she always had. Her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine either. "How long?" I asked. "Just a week, maybe 10 days tops. We found this cute little resort in Clearwater. Nothing fancy, just a place to relax and catch up on some mother-daughter time." Something about the way she said it rubbed me the wrong way. Too casual, too polished, like she'd rehearsed the whole speech in her head before walking in. "When were you thinking of going?" I wiped my hands on my apron and gave her my full attention. "Next Monday, if that's okay with you. I know it's short notice, but the resort had a cancellation and Mom really needs this, Dennis. She's been so worried about Dad lately." I nodded slowly. Vernon had been dealing with health problems. That much was true. High blood pressure, stress from running the hardware store. It made sense that Marlene would want a break. "Sure, babe. You two go ahead and have fun. I'll hold down the fort here." Tanya's face flooded with relief, and she practically bounced over to kiss my cheek. "Thanks, honey. You're the best." But as she walked away, the knot in my gut only tightened. Something about the whole thing felt off, and I couldn't figure out why. The week Tanya and Marlene were gone passed quietly enough. I kept busy at the shop, took on extra custom orders, even tackled some maintenance I'd been putting off. But the house felt different, empty in a way it had never felt before. Even when Tanya traveled for work, it hadn't felt like this. They came back on a Sunday afternoon, and that's when I knew for sure something was wrong. I was in the garage sharpening my knives when I heard Vernon's truck pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watched him unloading luggage while Tanya and Marlene stood by the truck, whispering like conspirators. Both of them were tanned, relaxed, but their body language set off every alarm bell in my head. "Hey there, stranger," Tanya said when she finally came inside, but her smile looked forced. "How was Florida?" I asked, pulling her into what should have been a warm welcome-home hug. She felt stiff in my arms, like she was tolerating it, not enjoying it. "Oh, it was wonderful," she said, pulling away quickly. The beach was gorgeous, and Mom got some color back in her cheeks. Marlene appeared in the doorway, looking nervous. "Dennis, honey, thank you so much for letting us have that time together. It was exactly what we needed." "Glad you ladies had fun," I said, but my eyes were on Tanya. She was fiddling with her purse strap, still avoiding eye contact. That's when she dropped the bomb. "Actually, Dennis," she said, "Mom and I were thinking we should probably see a doctor tomorrow. You know, just to make sure we didn't pick up any bugs while we were traveling. Beach resorts can be kind of germy." I frowned. "You both feeling okay?" "Oh, we feel fine," Marlene cut in quickly. "Just being cautious." "Better safe than sorry, right?" Tanya added. She nodded eagerly. "Exactly. We always do this after trips, standard procedure." That was news to me. In 15 years of marriage, I couldn't remember a single time Tanya had insisted on seeing a doctor after traveling. Hell, I practically had to drag her to her yearly checkups. What kind of doctor? I asked. The two of them exchanged a quick look. Just a regular physician, Tanya said. Nothing special. Probably just some blood work to make sure everything's normal. I think that's smart, Vernon said from the doorway. Can't be too careful these days. But there was something in his tone that rubbed me the wrong way, like he was reciting lines someone had fed him. The whole conversation felt staged, fake. Want me to come with you? I offered. Oh no, Tanya said quickly. That's not necessary. It's just routine women's health stuff. You'd be bored out of your mind in the waiting room. Marlene let out a laugh, but it sounded thin and forced. You know how these appointments go, Dennis. Lots of sitting around for nothing. I nodded, but that knot in my stomach only tightened. After they left, I found myself standing alone in the kitchen, replaying every word. None of it added up, and I was starting to think that beach vacation wasn't what they had claimed it was. The next morning, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Call it intuition, call it paranoia. But when your gut has steered you right on everything from beef suppliers to business deals for 12 years, you learn to trust it. Around noon, Vernon stopped by the shop. That alone was odd. He rarely came by during business hours unless he needed something specific. Dennis, he said, leaning against my counter, you mind if I ask you something man to man? I set down the cleaver I'd been using to portion chicken breasts. Shoot. Don't you think it's strange that the girls suddenly need to see a doctor after their trip? I mean, Marlene's never been one to rush to a doctor unless she's practically on her deathbed. So I wasn't the only one who thought it was weird. Yeah, it struck me as strange too. What are you thinking? I asked. Vernon rubbed his jaw, looking uneasy. Hell, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being an old fool, but something about this whole trip felt different. Marlene was acting secretive before they left. And now this doctor business. You want to drive over there with me? I suggested, just to make sure everything's okay. Vernon nodded grimly. I was hoping you'd say that. We drove to Dr. Brennan's clinic in Vernon's truck, both of us pretending we weren't suspicious of our own wives. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a couple of cars and Marlene's sedan. There they are, Vernon said, pointing toward the front entrance. We decided to wait in the truck at first, but after about 20 minutes, curiosity got the better of us. We went inside and sat down in the waiting area. The receptionist barely glanced up from her computer. That's when we heard it. Doctor. Brennan stepped out of an exam room, speaking to his nurse in a voice just loud enough for us to hear. Well, considering the circumstances of conception, we'll need to run additional tests for both patients. It's not every day we see a mother and daughter in this particular situation. Vernon went rigid beside me. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. The nurse nodded. Should we schedule them for the same follow-up appointment? Yes, Dr. Brennan said. Given that they're both pregnant by the same man, we'll want to monitor them closely. This is definitely an unusual case. The words slammed into me like a freight train. Both pregnant. Same man. My hands started to shake. Vernon's face turned chalk white. He looked at me with pure horror, and I knew we were thinking the exact same thing. Our wives hadn't just cheated. They'd been sharing the same lover. The exam room door opened, and Tanya stepped out first, with Marlene right behind her. Both women froze when they saw us sitting there. Dennis! Tanya's voice was barely audible. What are you doing here? I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like they might give out. I think the real question is, what the hell have you been doing? Marlene looked like she might throw up. Vernon rose to his feet, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. Both of you, Vernon said, his voice shaking. You're both pregnant by the same man. The silence that followed was suffocating. The four of us just stood there in the hallway, like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Tanya was the first to speak, and when she did, it was with the same act I'd seen a dozen times before when she got caught in smaller lies. Dennis, this is ridiculous, she said, forcing out a brittle laugh. You're jumping to conclusions based on what you think you heard. Marlene nodded quickly. Exactly. Doctors talk about all kinds of cases. You probably misunderstood the situation. Vernon took a step toward her, his face red with fury. Marlene, don't you dare stand there and lie to my face. We heard every word. Dad, please, Tanya said, turning to him with tears forming in her eyes. You're embarrassing us. This is a medical facility, not a place for you to throw around wild accusations. I watched my wife slip into her familiar routine, the one she used anytime she was cornered. Deflect, deny, shift the blame, make the accuser feel like they're the crazy one. It had worked on me before, not today. "Tanya," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "look me in the eye and tell me you're not pregnant." She hesitated for just a split second, but I saw it. Vernon did too. "Well," Vernon demanded, staring at his daughter. "Of course I'm not pregnant," Tanya snapped. "God, you men and your paranoia. We came here for routine checkups after traveling, nothing more." Marlene slipped her arm around Tanya's shoulders. "Honestly, you two are acting like conspiracy nuts," she said. "Next you'll be accusing us of running some criminal ring." But her voice was trembling, and she couldn't bring herself to look Vernon in the eye. I decided to push them. "Then you won't mind if I ask Dr. Brennan directly what kind of appointments you had today?" Both women went rigid. "That's private medical information," Tanya snapped immediately. "He can't tell you anything without our permission." "So give him permission," Vernon said, his tone icy. Marlene let out a shaky laugh. "This is getting out of hand. Vernon, you're being ridiculous." "Am I?" Vernon's voice rose a notch. "Then prove it. Walk back into that office and tell Dr. Brennan he can share your test results with your husband and me." The two of them exchanged a panicked look. "We don't have to prove anything to you," Tanya said, her voice getting higher and sharper. "This is harassment, and I'm not going to stand here and take it." She grabbed her purse and headed for the exit. Marlene hurried after her. They moved like people fleeing a crime scene. Vernon and I just watched our wives run from the truth. "They're lying," Vernon said quietly. I nodded. "Question is, what are we going to do about it?" We drove back to my house in silence, both of us turning over what we'd just heard. When we pulled into the driveway, Marlene's car was already there. They'd beaten us home. "You ready for this?" Vernon asked as we walked to the front door. "Been ready for 15 years, I said. Just didn't realize it. We found them in my kitchen, sitting at the table like they were planning a strategy. When we walked in, they both looked up with defiant expressions. "Dennis," Tanya said coldly, "I think you owe me an apology for that embarrassing scene at the clinic." I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Vernon stayed standing, arms crossed. "The only thing I owe you," I said evenly, "is the truth. And I think it's time you gave me some." Marlene shifted in her seat. "We already told you the truth. You misunderstood what you heard." "Did we?" Vernon asked, his voice deadly calm. "Because what I heard was pretty clear. 2 pregnant women. Same father." Tanya let out a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Dad, you're being ridiculous. Even if that were true, which it's not, what makes you think it has anything to do with us?" I leaned forward and studied her face. "Because you both bolted out of there like your hair was on fire. Innocent people don't run." "Dennis, we left because you were embarrassing us," she shot back, "throwing accusations around in a public place." "Then prove us wrong," I said simply. "Call Dr. Brennan right now and authorize him to share your test results with me." Tanya's jaw clenched. "I'm not doing that. My medical information is private, even from my husband, especially from my husband when he's acting like a paranoid lunatic." Vernon slammed his hand down on the table, making them both jump. "Enough games, Marlene. Are you pregnant or not?" Marlene's lower lip quivered. "Vernon, please don't yell at me. Answer the question." Tanya reached over and took her mother's hand. "Mom, you don't have to answer anything. They can't force us to—" "Yes," Marlene whispered, cutting her off. "I'm pregnant." The room went dead silent. Vernon's face went completely pale. "How far along?" he asked, barely audible. 8 weeks, Marlene said, tears spilling over. I turned to Tanya. "Your turn." She glared at me with pure hatred. "Go to hell, Dennis." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." I stood up, walked to the kitchen drawer, and took out my phone. "Fine, I'll call Dr. Brennan myself." "You can't do that," Tanya said quickly. "Patient confidentiality laws don't apply when I'm asking about my own wife's medical condition." I started to dial. "Wait," Tanya blurted, panic creeping into her voice. "Just wait." I paused and looked at her. "Yes," she said finally. "I'm pregnant too." Vernon dropped into a chair like his legs had given out. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "How long have you known?" "Since we got back from Florida," Tanya admitted. "And the father?" I asked. Something flickered in her eyes, maybe guilt, but it vanished almost instantly. "That's none of your business anymore," she said. Her words hung in the air like smoke from a burning house. Both women were pregnant, and neither would name the father. That told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man we were dealing with. "None of my business," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "My wife is carrying another man's child, and you think that's none of my business?" Tanya lifted her chin. "We're getting divorced anyway. What does it matter who the father is?" "We're getting divorced?" I said. That was news to me. "When did we decide that?" "I decided about 6 months ago," she replied coolly. "I just hadn't figured out how to tell you yet." Vernon stared at his daughter like he didn't recognize her. "Tanya, what the hell happened to you?" "I grew up, Dad," she said. "I realized I wasn't happy living this boring, predictable life." Marlene reached for her hand. "Sweetheart, maybe we shouldn't—" "Shouldn't what, Mom? Tell the truth? They already know we're pregnant. Might as well tell them the rest." A chill ran down my spine. "The rest?" Tanya smiled, and it was the cruelest expression I'd ever seen on her face. "We didn't go to Florida, Dennis. We went to Las Vegas." "Why?" I asked. "To meet someone," she said. "Someone who actually knows how to treat a woman. Right, Mom?" Vernon's hands were shaking. "Who, Marlene? Who did you meet?" Marlene couldn't look at him. "Someone from online," she said quietly. "We've been talking to him for months." The pieces started snapping into place, and I hated the picture they made. "Both of you?" I asked. "You were both talking to the same man online?" Tanya nodded. "He's nothing like you boring small-town men," Tanya said. "He's sophisticated, successful, knows what he wants." "And what he wanted was both of you," I said, feeling disgust rise in my throat. "He appreciates us," Marlene said defensively. "He makes us feel special." Vernon suddenly pushed back his chair, the legs scraping hard against the floor. "You're both sick. This is disgusting." "Don't be such a prude, Dad," Tanya scoffed. "It's the 21st century. People have different kinds of relationships now." I felt like I was staring at total strangers. These weren't the women I thought I knew. "What's his name?" I demanded. They went silent. I said, "What's his name?" "That's not important," Tanya muttered. "It is to me," I shot back. "I want to know who destroyed my marriage." Tanya let out a bitter laugh. "Your marriage was already destroyed, Dennis. You just didn't know it yet." I leaned across the table, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her eyes I used to love. "Give me his name, Tanya, right now." For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear flicker across her face. "His name," she said quietly, "is Marcus Webb, and he's going to take care of both of us better than either of you ever did." I wasn't about to let Marcus Webb vanish into the shadows. If he thought he could blow up 2 families and walk away clean, he was dead wrong. I'd built my business on one rule: you finish what you start. And this guy had started a war. "Give me his phone number," I said. Tanya folded her arms over her chest like a shield. "Why?" "Because I'm going to have a conversation with him." "Dennis, please don't do anything stupid," Marlene said, wringing her hands. Vernon gave a bitter laugh. "Stupid was trusting you two in the first place." I took out my phone and opened a new contact. "The number, Tanya, now." She rattled off the digits, reluctant but cornered. I dialed immediately and put the call on speaker so everyone could hear. It rang 4 times before a smooth male voice answered. "This is Marcus." "Marcus Webb?" I asked. "Who's asking?" "Dennis Holbrook. I believe you know my wife, Tanya." There was a long pause. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," he said. "Cut the crap. You got my wife pregnant. You got her mother pregnant too. Now we're going to talk about what you're going to do about it." Another pause, then a little chuckle. "Look, buddy, I think you got the wrong guy. I don't know anyone named Tanya." I glanced at my wife. She'd gone pale. "Really? Because she's sitting right here, and she seems to know you pretty well." "There must be some misunderstanding," he said. "The only misunderstanding," I interrupted, "is you thinking you could use my family and walk away. Where are you right now?" "I don't think that's any of your business." "Everything about you is my business now. You made it my business when you decided to play house with my wife and mother-in-law." Marcus's tone went icy. "I'm going to hang up now. Don't call this number again." "Hang up if you want," I said, "but I'll find you anyway. And when I do, We're going to have a face-to-face conversation about your responsibilities." The line went dead. Vernon stared at the phone. He just denied knowing them. Tanya's face was white as paper. He's probably just scared. Men get scared when they're confronted. Or maybe, I said slowly, he never planned on taking responsibility in the first place. Marlene broke down in sobs. "But he said he loved us. He said we were going to be a family." "He told you what you wanted to hear," Vernon said harshly. "You two got played by a professional liar." My mind was already racing ahead. Marcus Webb thought he could hide, but he had no idea what a determined man with the right connections could do. I ran a business in a small town. I knew people, private investigators, lawyers, guys who specialize in tracking down people who don't want to be found. "I'm going to track him down," I said. Tanya grabbed my arm. "Dennis, what are you planning to do?" I looked at her hand, then back at her face. "I'm going to make sure he takes responsibility for what he's done to all of us." Within 2 hours, I had Marcus's real information. It pays to have friends in low places, and my buddy Jake, who owned a computer repair shop, had skills that went far beyond fixing dead laptops. "Dennis," Jake said over the phone, "your boy Marcus Webb is a piece of work. Real name is Marcus Weber, and he's got a record." "What kind of record?" I asked. 3 different women in 3 different states have filed paternity suits against him in the last 5 years. All of them dropped the cases when he disappeared. I felt my blood pressure spike. "What else?" "He's currently married to a woman named Sandra Weber in Cincinnati. 8-year marriage, 2 kids. According to her social media, she has no clue about his extracurricular activities." Vernon was listening to my side of the call, his anger building with every word. When I hung up, he slammed his fist onto the table. "So, he's a serial predator," Vernon said. "And our wives fell for it, hook, line, and sinker." Tanya and Marlene had been sitting in stunned silence ever since the phone call with Marcus. Now Tanya finally spoke, her voice small and shaky. "That can't be right. Marcus told us he was single. He showed us pictures of his apartment." "Probably some rental he keeps for his hunting trips," I said coldly. Marlene started crying again. "But he seems so genuine, so caring." "That's what con men do, Mom," Vernon said. "They seem genuine, right up until they get what they want." I had Marcus's real address now, his work details, even his wife's contact info. The only question was what to do with it. "I'm driving to Cincinnati," I said. "Dennis, no," Tanya protested. "That's insane. What are you even going to accomplish?" "I'm going to make sure his wife knows exactly what kind of man she's married to, and I'm going to make sure he understands his actions have consequences." Vernon stood up. "I'm coming with you." "Dad, please," Marlene begged. "Just let it go." "We made mistakes, but nothing," Vernon cut her off. "This man destroyed our families. He needs to face the music." Tanya was starting to panic. "Dennis, think about this rationally. Going to Cincinnati won't solve anything." I looked at my wife, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved for 15 years now seemed more worried about protecting her lover than dealing with the wreckage of our marriage. "You're right," I said finally. "Going to Cincinnati won't solve anything, but it'll sure as hell make me feel better." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Vernon was right behind me. "Where are you going?" Tanya called after us. "To have a conversation with Sandra Weber," I said without turning around. "I think she deserves to know what her husband's been up to." The drive to Cincinnati took 3 hours, most of it spent in grim silence. We'd left our wives sitting in my kitchen, probably trying to spin this disaster into something they could live with. Sandra Weber lived in one of those picture-perfect suburbs where people mow their lawns on Saturdays and know all their neighbors' names. Her house was a 2-story colonial, with a minivan in the driveway and kids' toys scattered across the front yard. "You sure about this?" Vernon asked as we parked across the street. "Dead sure," I said. "She deserves to know what kind of man she married." We walked up to the front door, and I rang the bell. A moment later, a pretty brunette in her early 30s opened it, a toddler perched on her hip. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Mrs. Weber, my name is Dennis Holbrook. I need to talk to you about your husband, Marcus." Her smile faded. "Is Marcus in some kind of trouble?" "Ma'am, could we come in? This is going to take a few minutes to explain." She let us in and led us to the living room, settling the toddler into a playpen. An older boy, maybe 7 or 8, was on the couch watching cartoons. "Mrs. Weber," I began carefully, "your husband has been having affairs with my wife and her mother." The blood drained from her face. "That's impossible. Marcus travels for work, but he wouldn't." Vernon pulled out his phone and showed her some of the photos Jake had dug up online. "This is your husband with our wives in Las Vegas last month," he said. Sandra stared at the pictures, her hand covering her mouth. Oh my God, that's really him?" "There's more," I added quietly. "Both women are pregnant. They claim Marcus is the father." Sandra burst into tears. The little boy glanced over, worried. "Mommy, what's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetie. Keep watching your show," she said, wiping her eyes. Then she looked back at us, anger growing behind the hurt. "How many other women?" "At least 3 that we know of," I said. "Probably more. He's done this before." "That bastard," she whispered. "I'm 8 months pregnant with his 3rd child, and he's out there starting other families." "Mrs. Weber," Vernon said, leaning forward, "we're going to the police. Marcus needs to face consequences for what he's done." "Good," she said firmly. "I'll testify against him. I'll do whatever it takes." We spent another hour there, sharing what we knew and coordinating our next steps. By the time we left, she was already on the phone with a divorce attorney. The drive home felt lighter somehow. We'd done what we came to do. Marcus Weber's house of cards was finally collapsing. "Think the girls learned their lesson?" Vernon asked as we pulled into my driveway. "Don't know, don't care," I said. "I'm done trying to save people who don't want to be saved." When we walked into the house, we found Tanya and Marlene exactly where we'd left them. "How did it go?" Tanya asked nervously. "His wife is filing for divorce," I said simply, "and she's cooperating with the police investigation." Both women went pale. "Police investigation?" Marlene whispered. "Marcus Weber is a con artist and a bigamist," I said. "He's committed multiple felonies, and you 2 are star witnesses." Tanya shot to her feet. "We're not testifying against him." I looked at my wife with complete disgust. "Even now, after everything, you're still protecting him." "He's the father of my child, Dennis. I won't—" "He's a criminal, Tanya, and you're his accessory." Vernon stared at his daughter, disappointment written all over his face. "Tanya, how did you become this person?" She didn't answer. She just grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" I called after her. "Somewhere I don't have to listen to you judge me." Marlene hurried after her, leaving Vernon and me alone in what was left of our families. "Think we'll ever see them again?" Vernon asked. I shrugged. "Honestly, I hope not." 6 months later, I was a different man, living a different life. The divorce was finalized. The house was sold. I'd opened a new butcher shop on the other side of town. Vernon and I had grown closer through all of it, meeting for coffee every Sunday morning to talk about everything except our ex-wives. Tanya never did testify against Marcus Weber, neither did Marlene. They both vanished shortly after our confrontation, leaving town with no forwarding address. Vernon tried to find Marlene for a while, but eventually gave up. "Some people," he said, "don't want to be found." Marcus Weber was arrested 3 months after our trip to Cincinnati. Turned out Sandra wasn't the only wife he'd lied to. He had active marriages in 2 other states. The FBI got involved once they saw how big his operation was. He faced federal charges for bigamy, fraud, and identity theft. The local paper ran a story on him, calling him the heartbreak bigamist. They interviewed me, and I told them exactly what I thought of men who prey on vulnerable women. I also warned husbands to pay attention when their wives' behavior suddenly changes. My new shop was doing even better than the old one. Word of what happened spread, and instead of scaring people away, it seemed to draw them in. Men especially would come by, wanting to hear the story firsthand and share their own experiences with cheating spouses. I hired 2 full-time employees and was already thinking about opening a second location. Turns out, cutting out dead weight, both in business and in life, is good for the bottom line. Vernon sold the hardware store and moved to Florida. Down there, he reconnected with an old high school girlfriend whose husband had died the year before. He looked happier than I'd seen him in years. "You know what the best part is?" he told me over our last coffee before the move. "I sleep through the night now. No more lying awake wondering what Marlene's hiding, who she's texting, whether she's telling me the truth. I knew exactly what he meant. Peace of mind is worth more than any marriage built on lies. As for Tanya and Marlene, I heard through the grapevine that they'd moved to Atlanta and were trying to raise their kids as single mothers. Apparently, Marcus Weber's support dried up the moment he got arrested. Funny how that worked out. I didn't feel sorry for them. They made their choices. Now they were living with the consequences. That's how it should be. One evening, as I was about to close the shop, a woman slipped in just before I locked the door. She was pretty, early 30s, with honest eyes and calloused hands that said she knew what hard work was. "I know you're about to close," she said apologetically, "but I was hoping to get some advice about smoking a brisket for my father's birthday." We ended up talking for 20 minutes about meat prep and smoking techniques. She was sharp, asked smart questions, and actually laughed at my dumb jokes. When she left, with a brisket under her arm and my phone number in her hand, I realized I was smiling for the first time in months. Her name was Rachel, and she turned out to be everything Tanya wasn't: honest, loyal, and genuinely interested in building something real. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a man is having his old life completely torn down. It hurts like hell, but it clears the ground, so something better can grow in its place.